alive again and was lost and is found. I want to just point a few things out. I know a title that said it was time to go home, and sometime it is time to go home when you come to yourself. But I want to look at the eldest brother at this point. The oldest brother, we have to take a glance at him, but don't take a long look at him because he's something that you may not want to be. The oldest brother had a responsibility, and throughout this whole situation, he could have done something about it. When the younger brother was impetuous and ready to go and ready to have and ready to live life, it was the elder brother that could have rendered counsel to him and talked to him. Some would say, well, maybe the younger brother didn't want to listen. Well, as we move forward in the story, we find out that that may not have been the case. I also alluded to the doctrine of Balaam last week. The doctrine of Balaam is when King Balak called Balaam and wanted him to curse the children of Israel. And it did not go the first trip. The second time he called him again, he wanted him to curse the children of Israel. And that is when Balaam expressed to him that you cannot curse what God has blessed. And I'll say that again. You cannot curse what God has blessed. He says, even if you get the blessing out of the blessed place, you still can't curse it. But if you can get it out of the blessed place and get him in a position he can curse himself. We talked about when you complain, you curse yourself. Understand the younger brother had went on his journey, spent all that he had, found himself in a place where he began to have an appetite for things that he shouldn't have. The adversary wants to get you out of your blessed place so that he can get you to a place of want. You have to ask yourself, when do you know when it's time to go home? I know oftentimes when you go out and you hang out, I know when I was hanging out, when the lights come on, it's time to go home. Oftentimes when we're in church, when the lights go off, it's time to go home. But we have to look at the situation for what it is. This young man stayed in his father's house after he got everything. Now, keep in mind, by law, when the younger brother asked for his inheritance before the father died, by law, he could have taken him out in a public square and had him stoned to death. He didn't do that. He blessed him anyway. And the son stayed there in the house with his father's blessing until he took his journey. And we see that when he got to a place where he thought he wanted to party, he didn't have anything else left. So much that he began to have an appetite for what the world had to offer. You know, we talk in Matthew chapter 7, it says, judge not lest you be judged by the same judgment. Be careful how you criticize somebody, because the very thing that they're eating for lunch can be your dinner. Be careful how you judge people, because you can always talk about what you wouldn't do. David wrote, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. It's only when you get in that valley you find out who you really are. It's when you get in that valley you start to find out who your friends are. Because when you get in that valley, you find out who you are. So when you get to the point that you began to have a desire for what used to turn you away, you talked about what you would never do. Now you're looking for an opportunity to do it. Be careful how you judge somebody else. But that ain't what I came to talk about. I just came for a few minutes to just get you to glance at that elder brother. Because the elder brother had an opportunity to stop his brother, but he didn't. He had his own motives. And even after the younger brother came to himself and decided I needed to go home because I would rather be a servant in my father's house. How many of us have left the house of God and for pride are eating what we said we would never eat? How many of us have left the house of God and now we're hooked on something we said we would never be hooked on. We're drinking something we said we would never drink. We're smoking something we said we would never smoke. We're knocking on doors we said we would never knock on. We've gotten into the point that we're in a position that it is obvious we've fallen out of the favor of the Lord. But it's by God's grace you're still alive. It's by God's grace that you're still able to receive a word and hear a word from the Lord. We receive grace and mercy brand new every day. But let's glance at that older brother. The older brother was in the field, but when he came in, he heard the music and going on, and his father was celebrating the younger brother. Notice, if you will, that when the father had to come out and deal with the younger brother, the older brother could have went inside, but he did not do that. Understand that there are some people who are wicked and frustrated, and they don't like the love that you get. It didn't say that the father loved either son more important than the other one. But it let us know that the younger son was ready to get out and look at the world and see what was going on. However, let us also pay attention to the fact that the younger brother didn't bother to come outside to say nothing to his older brother. He wasn't looking for the older brother's approval. See, the older brother is the one that's at the church, but really it's the church inside of him. The older brother is the one that sits there and say, he'll be back. But you didn't bother to say nothing while he was gone. The older brother don't want to check on you. The older brother got a problem with you. But the father dealt with the elder brother. I say to you, when it's your turn to wake up and come back home, don't worry about the older brother. Don't worry about the naysayers. Don't worry about what they're going to think. Don't worry about how many people know your story, because the truth be told, they too busy trying to rewrite their story to have time to read yours. And they can only guess, like this elder brother did. He began to have a conversation with the father. Let the father deal with the elder brother. And as he began to talk to him, the first thing he wanted to do was distance himself. And he says, this thy son has returned. In other words, he has cut himself off. I don't worry about the people when I go through a storm. Now all of a sudden you disown me. You don't want to bother with me. Well, that's your situation between you and the Father. Quite frankly, the Father loved me enough to hang on the cross for me that I might have a way back home. So I'm not worried about that at all. And so as we began to see the conversation, I want you to look at verse 20. It says, and he was angry and would not go in. Therefore came his father out and entreated him. The father shouldn't have never left his guest for the elder brother. Watch people who would want to draw your attention away from the celebration. That's an awful situation. I won't dig into that no further right this minute, but I will get into it later. 29 says, and he answered and said to his father, lo, this many years do I serve thee, neither transgressed I at any time thy commandment, and yet thou never gavest me a kid that I might make merry with my friends. Let me get this right. The purpose for the shedding of the blood was to cover the sin. So how is it you want your father to commit murder for your joy? Because the sacrifice an innocent animal and there's no sin to cover. What are you saying that you want the father to do? Be careful, people who are asking you to sacrifice something for absolutely nothing but their own pleasure. Verse 30, but as soon as this thy son was come. You see how he just separated himself? Verse 30. I'm in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 15. But as soon as this thy son was come, which hath devoured thy living with harlots, thou hast killed for him the fatted calf. How he know how he devoured his living? Either one, the younger brother is doing what you wish you could have done, but you didn't have enough nerve to try. Two, you kept up with your younger brother and knew what he was doing, and you still didn't render him aid in the midst of his situation. Huh? But you want to get upset. 31. And he said unto him, son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. I'm giving you everything that I have, son. 32. It was meet that we should make merry and be glad, for this thy brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is found. I'm going to read 32 again for a reason. It was meet that we should be merry and be glad, for this thy brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is found. Notice it never said if the elder brother went into the house. It never said if he went into the house. And here's the reason why it never said. Because it's an opportunity to answer that question for yourself. What would you have done? Would you have joined the party? Would you have showed them love? Would you have welcomed them in? What would you have done had we done that? Are you with me, family? Just wanted to read a little something to you. Wanted to